Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back, and hello, everybody new here on the beta stage on the fourth Baltic MSP Forum. My name is Artis Ozolinch, and I'm the stage host here in Latvia. And right now, we're going to turn to the second workshop today, and it is workshop number 5, the role of MSP in supporting sustainable ocean multi-use and blue economy. A small reminder from our side, ladies and gentlemen, viewing this on the platform, please do use the comment section on the right-hand side of the live stream window, and do send in your comments, send in your questions to the speakers, because at the end of the session, your questions will be answered. So please do not hesitate anything when you have a question, write it directly in the chat, in the comments section, so that our content moderator can use them and answers them. And speaking of our content moderator for the session, she's a senior marine policy and planning consultant. She has been leading projects and studies in the field of maritime spatial planning, integrated maritime policy, and ocean multi-use. Ladies and gentlemen, representing the SUBMARINER network for Blue Growth, Ivana Lukic. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Artis. That is a fantastic introduction. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us for this workshop titled Role of MSP in Supporting Sustainable Ocean Multi-Use and Blue Economy. Again, my name is Ivana Lukic, and I will be your content moderator for today. Today, we have 5 exciting presentations lined up. On the next slide, we will see the agenda. First, we will have a presentation from my colleague, Laurine Tertre, from SUBMARINER Network for Blue Growth, who will present the state of play, multi-use, ocean multi-use state of play informed by 2 ongoing, very innovative projects called United and Multiframe, both focusing on the concept of multi-use. This will be followed by 4 different examples, or rather studies in different fields, all again focusing on the concept of multi-use and the blue economy. We'll be touching upon topics such as offshore wind combined with aquaculture, combined with sustainable seaweed, fisheries, what are the interactions with fisheries, what are kind of the impacts, and also social sustainability and the combination between offshore wind farms and tourism. So with this, having said this, I would also like to remind you to please use the platform to insert your questions. Please use the chat box to insert your questions to our speakers. At the end of the workshop, we will also have a discussion session. So we very much look forward to your questions there. This having said, I would like to introduce my colleague Laurine Tertre. She has been working at a SUBMARINER Network for Blue Growth as a consultant for almost a year now, and among other blue economy topics, she has been focusing very much so on the topic of ocean multi-use and working extensively on the United and Multiframe project. Laurine will give us the state of play informed by these 2 projects. Laurine, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Ivana, for this brief introduction. I hope you can all hear me well. So as said, my name is Laurine Tertre. I am also a consultant at the SUBMARINER Network for Blue Growth. Ocean multi-use is taking an increasing part of our project portfolio at SUBMARINER Network for several years now. We've taken part in the MUSES project from 2016 till 2018. And we are involved now in 2 major ongoing multi-use projects since 2020, namely the United and Multiframe project, which you can both see on this slide. So to set the scene for today's workshop, I will first present you the ocean multi-use state of play in light of project development in both United and Multiframe. But first, let's take a quick look at the definition of ocean multi-use. So multi-use is a relatively young concept that emerged following the 2014 EU Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, with MSP being an important process in bringing multi-use to life. So far, it has been defined, or let's say it has been understood as the intentional joint use of resources by two or more users. This new concept of ocean multi-use allows for a radical shift from exclusive to inclusive marine resource sharing, which we think can be of real benefit to the future of our crowded seas. So on the slide here, you can see various multi-use combinations, such as offshore wind farm and tourism, but also fisheries and tourism in a so-called pescatourism system, and so on. But what are actually the benefits of ocean multi-use? Well, the definition of multi-use has its roots in the concept of spatial efficiency. Multi-use is indeed expected to bring a more efficient use of the ocean, and so the idea is really to move from a sectoral management of the seas to a more holistic and coherent way of managing marine activities. So the concept of ocean multi-use is expected to um, also reduce conflicts, of course, and ensure a better acceptance of some of the new activities in the ocean. And ultimately, multi-use should also provide environmental benefits, as you can see on the slide, and as well as socio-economic value to the local communities, for instance. Well, both United and Multiframe are building on a plethora of research projects that have been implemented in the past 5 to 10 years, as you can see on this slide. They've all explored the concept of ocean multi-use and proposed a variety of multi-use solutions. However, actual developments in the water remain rather few, and this is mainly due to the lack of knowledge about potential impact on the economy and especially also on the marine environment. So let's dive into one of these projects, the United project first. So it is a H2020 EU funded project, so actually a front runner in the field of ocean multi-use. As it will test the viability of ocean multi-use systems in 3 different European seas. So you can see on the slide, you've got the Baltic Sea with Denmark, the Med with Greece, but also 3 pilots in the North Sea, in Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium. So the United project consists of 5 different demonstration pilots. And what makes it so special is that these are really large-scale pilots that are conducted in the real marine environment. Precisely, United Multiframe comes next. Only United wants to address current bottlenecks related to the large-scale installation of multi-use ocean infrastructure. So, for instance, be it safety of operation, technological gaps, etc. And with United, partners in the project are collecting very precious information about impacts of ocean multi-use, and only once we will know about these impacts, then regulators and planners can finally approve multi-use within MSP plans. Here on this slide, you can see that partners in United are currently in the pre-operational phase, meaning that they are preparing themselves for offshore deployment, be it via capacity building, material development, and all sorts of necessary pre-testings, which you can see on all these pictures. For most of the pilots, offshore deployment, or so-called the operational phase, this will start by next autumn. So at the moment, the teams are working all full speed to make final preparations. You can see it here on the slide with the German team that is busy collecting seaweed samples for installation offshore on this platform, which you can see on the left side of the slide. And they are at the same time completing some really necessary safety trainings. So yeah, United is, as you can see, about real-life demonstrators. Now, a different scale, Multiframe gathers a global team of partners coming from 4 different continents, as you can see on the left side of the slide. This means that the Multiframe project enters a pretty unknown territory, namely the assessment of multi-use opportunities from this time a global perspective. So actually within the Multiframe project, the idea is to produce a streamlined guide on how to assess the potential of ocean multi-use systems worldwide. And this assessment will be tested in 6 different case studies. So in the United States, in Brazil, Mozambique, France, Norway, and Sweden. So this guide on how to assess multi-use globally is actually, in project terms, it's actually called the assessment approach. And it's at the core of this multi-frame project, as you can see on the right. The assessment approach should help planners to determine via a list of different steps which location and type of multi-use has the most potential for environmental, economic, and social sustainability. So this assessment approach is at the moment currently under development by project partners, and it will be reviewed and really important will be co-developed by a wide range of public, private, but also research and community actors. This, of course, to ensure a better exploitation by the expected key users, which you can see on the slide. So planners, developers, and policymakers as well. And now let me get to the next slide. Yeah, now the core of today's event, but how can MSP actually support ocean multi-use? So based on several recommendations from workshop discussions, of course, like we have today, but also, and very importantly, the multi-use action plan from the Muses project that the SUBMARINER network was involved in, it became clear that multi-use goes beyond MSP. So it requires a more proactive and synergetic management of ocean resources in maritime spatial plans. Then also, as said before, a big issue here lies for multi-use in the lack of knowledge on potential impacts of this new concept. So multi-use test sites within existing maritime spatial plans should be definitely identified to assess these impacts like it is done in projects like United. And this would, of course, build confidence, more confidence for ocean multi-use. Multi-use also should be a more participatory process. The multi-use action plan from Muses states that permanent discussion forums are needed to build ownership and identify collaboration opportunities across sectors. So it has to be really done on an ongoing basis and not just a single consultation, but really allow a permanent discussion with permanent discussion forums. Last but not least, multi-use can, of course, reduce conflicts over ocean space directly from the start. So some specific sectors, such as tourism, aquaculture, and fishing it is highly important that these sectors are early involved in MSP and in offshore renewables planning processes. Finally, as also raised in the Muses action plan, there's a clear need for a long-term collaborative platform on ocean multi-use, so a forum that would aim to support the exchange of knowledge, good practices and opportunities on the topic of multi-use, and that's precisely what the Multi-Frame project is implementing at the moment. So we've included here in the slide, and we can share this with you later, the link to the multi-use knowledge network that Multi-Frame is launching at the moment. So stay tuned. This is happening. I will also share with you a follow-up questionnaire, which we would kindly ask you to fill in during other presentations or after the workshop. And it's about how to improve our communication in the field of ocean multi-use and provide you more information about multi-use according to your specific profile. So we'll share this with you as well. Thank you all for your attention. I will now hand over back to Ivana for our first session.
Thank you very much, Laurine. Excellent. Thanks very much for a very good overview. I would say in the past we've had lots of projects also funded by the European Commission in the field of ocean multi-use, lots of them theoretical, also exploring what are the regulatory challenges, environmental impacts, and so on. And many of them have developed these innovative designs. However, now is the time to really test that, as you said, in the real water and see what are actually the impacts, and kind of in that way collecting that information, possibly build confidence of planners to consider such options in the future as well. Okay, I would not waste more time. I would like to introduce our next speaker for today. That is Sophie Locke. Sophie joined Blue Marine Foundation in 2018 and has previously worked for the Environmental Protection Authority in Western Australia, and is an environmental consultant and ecologist in London. Sophie has an interest in effective MPA management, ecosystem recovery, spatial analysis, and blue carbon habitats. She will tell us a bit more about the study conducted to assess the potential of restoring the habitats in offshore wind farm, and therefore having this combination between nature protection priority and also energy generation. Sophie, thanks very much for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Right, thank you so much, Ivana. Hello from a very warm and sunny London. My name is Sophie. I work as the research and project manager for the Blue Marine Foundation. My colleague David Tudor is the projects director at Blue, and he will be joining us later for the discussion session. So as Ivana explained, over the next 10 minutes, I'll be presenting our work to explore marine habitat enhancement and species restoration within offshore wind farms in the UK. I'll provide an overview of our recent feasibility study with Orsted on the Gunfleet Sands wind farm, explain the challenges in this sector, some examples of success, and exciting pilot projects, as well as the role of marine spatial planning. So to start off with, just a brief overview of what's going on in the UK. So by 2030, over a third of British electricity will be produced by offshore wind power. Considering this increased target and the sheer scale of offshore wind farms around the UK, there is a really interesting synergy to explore between offshore wind industry and marine conservation. There are already existing pilot projects looking into marine habitat enhancement, as many of you know, some of which are mentioned today. And these are typically structured around the base of wind turbines, and looks at how this might benefit benthic ecology, as well as important commercial fisheries. Blue's previous focus has looked at native oysters, which Blue is currently restoring around the UK at a number of project sites. The native oyster is a critical ecosystem engineer that creates biodiverse reefs. However, we've lost 95% of them over the past 20 years, despite native oysters historically covering about 20% of the North Sea. So to address part of this problem, Blue started a project with multinational power company Orsted and the Essex Native Oyster Restoration Initiative, or ENORI, to explore how native oyster population recovery within the Gunfleet Sands wind farm could contribute to an area of conservation interest further inshore. So the aim of the project would be to understand how broodstock oysters could be encouraged to grow and repopulate within the offshore wind farm, ultimately boosting populations in the nearby area designated for restoration. So to do this, we developed a technical feasibility study, and this analysed the ecological requirements of native broodstock oysters, as well as the hydrodynamics of the wind farm. The study examined the best positioning and design for placing native oysters within cages or directly on the seabed. And while there was a small window of opportunity for oyster larvae to eventually be transported into the designation of conservation interest, it was ultimately unlikely to coincide with larval release. So this particular wind farm as well had quite challenging hydrodynamic conditions. It is a dynamic sandy site, meaning it was simply less suitable than desired. So despite the decision not to pursue with a pilot study at this specific site, the research has laid a brilliant foundation for Blue and our partners to investigate site suitability for over 50 UK wind farms. So we are now developing a high-level site selection matrix, and this analyzes these 50 wind farms and their suitability for restoration, habitat enhancement of over 22 marine species that are native to the region. The matrix uses data on substrate type, proximity to relevant conservation areas for certain species, nursery grounds, and a number of other ecological and logistical variables. So following the development of this matrix, we are now uploading our results into an ArcGIS interactive map. And this will support stakeholder discussions and act as a conversation starter. And I say conversation starter because we're very aware that further research is required to make a really educated decision on what habitat enhancement and restoration is best at the site. However, this does give us a far more informed understanding of what options are best to pursue. This work runs in parallel with an exciting new postdoctoral study focusing on forming a stakeholder decision-making tool. And we are working in partnership with the University of Oxford to develop this. And finally, Blue has also secured funding to conduct a number of other feasibility studies for late 2021 and early 2022, and this will focus on wind farms of key interest. So the sector is extremely exciting, it's very novel, but there are obviously a number of operational and regulatory challenges that Blue is aware of and are facing. So in terms of regulatory challenges, there is a general lack of support or clear definition of biodiversity net gain in the UK anyway. So this is important because habitat restoration and species restoration sits underneath this concept of biodiversity net gain. And more broadly, there can also be tension between renewable energy policy targets and targets for biodiversity enhancement. There is little argument that both should be delivered and targets should be increased, but the tension does arise in the location of energy development and the knock-on impact on biodiversity at the project level. Marine licensing is definitely another thing to consider. So the regulatory system in the UK addresses impacts, even if habitat or species enhancement is proposed. So developments are primarily licensed through this lens of impact. And while this is very much understandable in the legal sense, it doesn't necessarily allow for much flexibility or trade-offs. For example, the opportunity to enhance certain aspects of the environment while others may be impacted. Seeking permission for restorative activities through the Crown Estate is another element to address in the UK. The nature of the UK system means there is no one-stop shop for consent landowner permission. It is required from the Crown Estate, whilst a separate statutory system is in place for planning permission as well. So two things to consider. Finally, decommissioning is another key point, and this considers what the permanence of restoration activities would be. So, for example, when will the decommissioning of an offshore wind farm impact restoration efforts? Could restoration work help compensate for the impact of decommissioning and other considerations? To finish, there are also a number of other kind of operational challenges, additional health and safety and engineering challenges, and these are likely to vary depending on the type and scale of restoration. So as mentioned earlier, there's a number of very exciting pilot projects underway that demonstrate synergy between industry and conservation, despite these former challenges. So, for example, the Van Oord Eneco wind farm conducted a native oyster restoration pilot project quite recently, and this is really broadening our knowledge of what kind of conditions are required to support a successful native oyster restoration project. The Northern Wind Farm in Belgium is exploring a completely different species, looking at macroalgae cultivation. And finally, back at the UK, fisheries research has been carried out at Orsted's inshore westernmost Rough Wind Farm. And this showed that wind farm construction and operation had no impact on sea crustacean stocks within the area. And it's really crucial for more pilot projects to be analysed and researched and monitored at this level, as it will really support our knowledge of this restoration space and the opportunities available to us. So to finish this presentation today, I just wanted to end on spatial planning. So we really need to consider the role of marine spatial planning. Restoration project implementation will typically follow supportive policy development and planning. Blue is very aware of the potential negative impacts of offshore wind farms and how they can impact the marine environment. However, hundreds of square kilometres in the North Sea is already occupied with operational sites. And with many more to be built over the next decade, we need to consider how the structures already in the ocean can have a conservation benefit, but also how those yet to be built can be placed within a site that has environmental suitability and enhancement as a core consideration. As mentioned earlier, there is an absence of UK projects, as UK policy is not inherently supportive of net gain integration into offshore wind development just yet. The sectoral nature of marine planning in the UK to date has not led to multi-use of marine space being at the forefront of thinking. So marine planning, particularly in the early years, set out to answer very specific questions that were posed, such as where to put a very large offshore wind farm. And due to market and policy drivers, there was little or no incentive to really establish areas of multi-use, either from the developer or statutory side. Commercial fishing, including bottom trawling, is also permitted within offshore wind farms in the UK. And this is just an additional activity we need to be aware of, which may impact the success of restoration activities, another spatial element to consider. That being said, marine planning has a huge opportunity when we're considering how multi-use can happen, but it really will require biodiversity enhancement to be presented in a way that ensures developers will not face sudden development risks in order to deliver environmental improvements. This and any supporting policy needs to be developed in a way where net gain is ecologically appropriate for the region based on nearby designation, restoration efforts, or the natural and historical distribution of species. The need to reframe how we consider offshore wind planning and its relationships with conservation is critical. And while the environmental impact assessment process in the UK can adequately address the impact of the development, it could be more effective to partially flip this process and consider environmental net gain as a key component of offshore wind site selection, rather as just an additional benefit or something that should be seen as compensation. So to finish today, Blue is really excited to push forward our site selection work, as well as our partnership with our postdoctoral researcher at Oxford. Blue is really keen to further explore how marine protected areas, restoration, and broader marine conservation can coexist with offshore energy to ensure both climate and biodiversity goals can be obtained. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Sophie. This is a very good overview and very good to learn more about the opportunities that offshore wind farms, the existing offshore wind farms, might provide for the restoration, but then also to learn about possible regulatory regulatory challenges and the environmental impacts that we also have to think of. The new thing for me also to learn was especially this aspect of what happens when offshore wind farms are decommissioned. So how that impacts this connection with for example, oyster restoration that is already established at the site. So yeah, I at least have lots of questions, but I think that your presentation is also very well linked with the next one that we will hear today, focusing on the impact of offshore renewable energies in Europe on European fisheries. About that, we will hear from Vanessa Stelzenmüller. Vanessa is leading the research unit of spatial management at the Thunen Institute of Sea Fisheries, Germany. She works on the evaluation of socio-ecological trade-offs of spatial planning options and the associated risk of cumulative effects for fish and fisheries. Vanessa, the virtual floor is yours.
Many thanks. Yeah, thank you very much for this kind introduction. So basically, what I would like to do is just talk about the interaction of offshore renewables and fisheries and the role of MSP. And I will explain a little bit more on the details and the background. As it has been just mentioned, we conducted for the European PECH Parliament a study where we looked at the expansion and overlap of European fisheries and the expansion of offshore renewables. On that map on the left-hand side, what you can see is a spread of offshore renewables across different European seas or different or regions. So the orange dots are the current offshore renewable installations, and in blue you have the installations within the next 5 years, and then in orange, these are the ones that we have from 2025 and beyond. So what we basically see, we have that spread into rather offshore areas. And so we have an increase, we can expect an increase or changes in the conflict potential between fisheries and offshore renewables. So the expansion of offshore renewables is regulated by marine spatial planning in most countries. And so what does it mean when we have offshore renewables, or when we are constructing offshore wind farms? We are basically losing, or the fishing sector is losing fishing opportunities. This means economic losses for the fishing sector. And also on land, it might have some sociocultural impacts on the fishing communities, depending directly on those fishing opportunities. So, but on the other hand side, as we just heard in the previous presentation, we also can expect some recovery potential and some ecological benefits from these offshore wind farms, for example, also for fisheries resources that might be lead to fisheries benefits through restocking, or maybe the availability of new resources and new opportunities between or synergies between fisheries and offshore renewables. So here, for example, you can see, I think that this is very small for most of you to see, but basically what you can see is that across all European seas, we have an increase of this overlap of fishing activities and offshore renewables from 25 onwards. That means compared to the current state, we will have at least a triple or fourfold degree of conflict potential between these sectors. So this means that when we then look at the details for these different offshore renewable expansion levels, so from the present state and to the next 5 years, and then from 25 onwards. So what you can see, for example, in the Baltic Sea, the Celtic Sea, and the North Sea, we can see that for these different levels of expansion, we have a variation of fishing métiers. So this means we have different fishing sectors or different types of fisheries that are affected by this overlap with the overlap of these offshore renewables. So this means, from a stakeholder consultation perspective, that you have to engage or have to design this process that you are engaging with different types of fishing activities. Also, that means you might have other implications on land, so other indirect effects. So, and now it's the question how marine spatial planning can mitigate this loss of fishing grounds and how this loss of fishing opportunities might be compensated. So this is about co-location. So as we heard, we have in particular around monopiles, we have scour protection from stone, which means we have artificial reef structures. And we have seen in recent publications and recent studies that we can expect an increase of benthic biomass. Also, we see marine mammals are increasingly attracted to offshore wind farms. And we also expect and see a spillover of biomass from fish and decapods, for example, such as brown crab, from offshore wind farms. So this is what I would like to talk about, is that we conducted a pilot study where we try to understand what are the potential spillover resources from a fisheries perspective. So first thing we did was to look at a supply and demand analysis of these type of resources, looked at the economic viability of these when fisheries targeting such spillover resources. And we then, based from what we have learned, we then try to understand if we already see some fisheries benefits in the fishing effort patterns that we can see around around offshore wind farms that are in the water for quite some while. And this is what I would like to explain a little bit in the next few slides. So we had a pilot study around or close to the island, the Helgoland. It's an offshore island, approximately 225 kilometers from the land, from the coast. And so we had what in particular in Germany, so this is the German part of the North Sea, it's a German EEZ, we have no free, from a research perspective or from a scientific perspective, we do not have free access to those offshore wind farms. So getting access and having the opportunity to do research is a very complicated thing, but I will come to that later. So basically we conducted fisheries on brown crab using baited pots, let them soak for 24 hours. So basically what we found is indeed some indication for spillover mechanisms for brown crabs. So catches have been higher, very close to those monopiles, and have been decreasing the further away from those offshore wind farms. Interestingly, we found very small crabs very close to the monopiles as well as larger ones. This means, this is, by the way, the opposite to many modeling studies. And so this indicates also that these offshore wind farms can function as nursery areas for these species. So what we wanted to then to understand if what we have observed in this small case study, if we can see some patterns or some indication of fisheries benefits around all those offshore wind farms that have been installed since 2015 in the German EEZ. So this is what you see on those stacked bar charts on the left-hand side. And in the gray bars, you can see the distances to the approximate offshore wind farm. So interestingly, over the last 5 years, this is what you see in the top left corner, is that we can see an increase of fishing effort very close to those offshore wind farms, in particular within the last 5 years. So this gives already an indication that it's quite interesting and it seems economically viable from the international pot fisheries to place their pots in the closer to offshore wind farms. And we further have been able to characterize these different patterns that we could observe. So we have said, this is what you see in the lower figure. So for example, we have seen fisheries that have been there before, have been displaced in the time when the offshore wind farm has been constructed, and came back fishing after the offshore wind farm was up and running. Also, interestingly, is the black dotted line. We have seen and observed new fisheries. So new international fisheries targeting brown crab after the offshore wind farm has been in operation for 1 or 2 years. So it seems that we can conclude that there are some fisheries benefits. And looking at the kind of lessons learned so far, what we know, in the European, at least in another European context between fisheries and offshore renewables, we can see that, for example, in UK and Denmark, regulations are different. There's a coexistence between these two different sectors, so fisheries and offshore wind farms. So in Belgium, for example, we have rather the concept of co-location, where two activities are actively managed together. So this applies for fisheries, aquaculture, and offshore wind farms. While in the Germany and in the Netherlands, we have rather the situation of cooperation, where two sectors try to get some benefits from their relationship. But these are all really rather pilot studies, at least in Germany and the Netherlands, and also in Belgium, in the UK and Denmark. This is more this concept of fisheries and in combination with offshore wind farms is much more established. So, and looking at these different cases, we have also reported to the PESH committee some measures that could mitigate conflicts, which have been identified as early stakeholder consultation, the involvement of third parties, for example, to facilitate negotiation processes, compensation payments. But this is really not the best choice of tool for a sustainable solution between those sectors. Then co-design approaches for setting up co-location of these two different sectors is definitely something that this idea of co-development and co-design that would be that could be identified as very promising. And we need success stories, and we need to promote the cooperation. Those cooperation examples and this would then allow mutual learning to inform marine spatial planning, how these mitigation measures and how this management for these two sectors could be set up. To sum that up, when it comes to fisheries and offshore renewables, so marine spatial planning has a role to play, and it does not yet address really such ecological complexities around activities such as fisheries, which are depending on the use of resources. So these are free-ranging activities. So marine spatial planning has a role to promote really the cooperation between those sectors. And doing this, marine spatial planning can contribute to the long-term adaptive capacity of the fishing sector, meaning helping to diversify, for example, fishing practices, establishing a sustainable fisheries, for example, that could then help to mitigate those direct economic losses, for example. And maybe I have forgot to mention that. So the brown crab fishery is a type of fisheries is passive fisheries. So putting or using baited pots means it's very selective, and it's completely a different type of fisheries than having a trawled gear, for example. And what we have learned so far, so for marine spatial planning, it's not enough to identify, for example, important fishing grounds, because, and using that in a marine spatial planning process, because there's climate change, there are other effects, there are competition, there are the variability between the resource variability and catchabilities, for example. So, which all means there are very dynamic direct and indirect socioeconomic effects. So by pushing for these synergies and trying to see where are the really locations that are suitable to put co-location in practice, this is really the role, and I think the message I would like to bring across. So, and also little is known, and this is my next point basically. Little is known about the ecological function of this these offshore renewable sites. So this means that we need almost a micro planning, or we need to look at site-specific suitability of establishing co-location between fisheries and offshore renewables. So as it has already been mentioned, this is a new concept, and it's still in its infancy, and we need really good practice guidance, and that would help really long-term sustainable solutions. And with that, I would like to thank also my colleagues, involved in the PESH study, but also involved in the practical study that I just introduced.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, and thanks for the picture of the crab. It's very nice to see something actually tangible coming out, and to also learn about the projects that you're involved with. Yeah, so you have mentioned actually how offshore wind farms can potentially contribute to the nature restoration. So we have heard about restoration examples from the UK, potential of the offshore wind farms for that, but then also nature enhancement and possible impacts on fisheries in that regard. Okay, again, I have lots of questions and I see lots of questions coming up in the chat field. We keep these for the end. I would now like to introduce our next speaker for today. That is Frederick Grondtal, who is the head of Department for Sustainable Development, Environmental Science and Engineering at the Royal Institute of Technology, KTH, in Stockholm, Sweden. And his research is focusing on the sustainable use of marine resources for food, feed, chemicals, and energy. And he also has a key role in steering the activities of SUBMARINER network. So Frederick, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivana. And I'm going to talk today a little about wind farms in Sweden and seaweed farms in Sweden and how they could be combined. So we could start with the first slide here. As I already said in an earlier workshop, is that our planet is blue, and we need to, the future and the sustainability of our planet lay in the hands of the blue ocean and all the space we have there, 71% of our planet. So we need to find ways how to exploit now the blue planet in a sustainable way. And one thing is, of course, aquaculture, and another thing is putting out energy systems such as wind farms there out in the blue. And this is necessary because we reach the carrying capacity of the ecosystems and land resources, we could say. Could take next slide. So what I'm going to talk about is wind farms in Sweden. And this is a little bit of a tricky thing because most of the wind exploration taking place in Sweden is happening on land far up north, where we have a lot of wind farms and development. But Sweden also have the biggest sea area in Europe. So we also have a lot of sea, but we have very little wind farms in the sea. We have some on Gotland, on the island of Gotland, on the Baltic side, but they are too far from land and they cannot be balanced on Gotland, and there are not cables who take over the energy to land, so it's complicated there. We need to put our wind farms a little bit more south, where we have most of the people, in order to get rid of the energy that they generate. And then there is a pressure now on Sweden to develop the wind energy at sea, offshore wind farms. And there is a lot of things happening now with different companies that want to develop wind farms, offshore wind farm in Sweden. A lot of them want to do it in the Baltic Sea. That is natural. We have a lot of sea space in the Baltic Sea. But the other problem with wind farms in Sweden is that no one really likes them. It's very much like, not on my backyard. We don't want to see it. We don't want to have them in the horizon. So it's very difficult. And I myself, I'm working with developing seaweed farms in the ocean, and we have been approached now from wind developers. Couldn't we combine this in some way? Because there could be a mutual benefit, because algae cultivation is considered to be very nice. People like seaweed cultivation, but they don't like wind farms. Maybe the combination could be a good idea. So that is what I'm going to talk about. We could take next slide. Yeah, and of course, then we have been talking all the day here about multi-use, and that is, of course, necessary. Unfortunately, aquaculture is not so good to develop in the Baltic Sea. The salinity there is low. It doesn't have the good opportunities for large-scale seaweed farming and so on. So there we have to find something other to develop than aquaculture, I would say. But on the Swedish Atlantic coast, we have the opportunity to combine with aquaculture. That could be, as we already have said, it could be mussels, it could be other things, but it could also be seaweed farming. And I would like to talk a little bit more about that. We could take next slide. And together now with, not together, but there is side by side here, the seaweed farm is developing in Sweden, and the wind farming offshore is under development in Sweden. And a large energy company of Sweden, Vattenfall, are now in a consultation process about developing quite a big wind park in Sweden offshore on the west coast of Sweden. Can take next slide. And here on this slide you could see where it is. It's very close to our neighbors, Denmark, at the Middelgrund here. And we will hear that on the next talk. It's quite an area. It's, in this case, 170 square kilometers, a huge development. And here you could see the distance to different cities. Up here is Gothenburg. This is the west coast of Sweden. For us working with seaweeds, this is a very interesting area because this is also an area where we have a little bit high salinity water. We know that seaweed grows there, and that could be a very interesting place. We cannot let just the wind farm be there. It has to be combined with something else. And seaweed cultivation is also growing. So we need this space actually. And I think there is good benefits to combine the windcraft here and the seaweed. We could take, I would say, yeah, it doesn't matter. Here is just, it's not there yet. It's under consolation, and it's been a lot of environmental studies out in this area. This Middelgrund is very close to Nature 2000 areas. There is a lot of very important grounds for fishing and other marine life. So it's a sensitive area in many ways. But that have been investigated in many studies. And now there is a consolation process that we will always have in Sweden, where a lot of stakeholders are discussing this. Should we do it or not? Blah, blah, blah. And then it should eventually go to the environmental court in order to get an approval. So we will see what happens. But in the meantime, we have been in contact with Vattenfall here. It's our university, Vattenfall, some seaweed companies, and also SMHIs, that is the Swedish Meteorological Hydrological Institute. And we would like to go out here now in this area to see if it could be very suitable also for seaweed cultivation. And we are planning an expedition in the autumn to go out here and see also to measure the opportunities for seaweed cultivation out there. We could take next slide. This on the backyard thing that is discussed in Sweden. So you have to do a lot of these things. And this is from land, mainland, and in the horizon here, you could see how this very large wind farm would look like. So you will see it from mainland, and that is of course a disadvantage. But unfortunately, we don't have so much marine space, so it can't be further away. I mean, this is, after that we have Denmark. But this is one of the big concerns actually. We could take the next slide. So, and this is one of these multi-use projects now we have been discussing here together with Vattenfall, SMHI, and what we want to have different work packages here, looking into the aquaculture aspect, the marine energy aspects. That is, of course, what they are doing. Other uses of aspects like tourism, fishery, and we have already heard about the improvement of biodiversity out where the wind farms are. There could be much better fishery there, lobsters, crabs, etc. And then how stakeholders could be involved, the development, the communication, Environmental aspects is always there, of course. The economical, the technical aspects, and of course the legal planning aspects. Now it's under Vattenfall, so all the legal things are around there. And if we include a seaweed farm into this area, it will be the seaweed will be judged also by the environmental law. So it's not in a combination here. It's like we are meeting now, starting to discuss if this could be possible. Could take next slide. So, and then I would say some few words about the seaweed farming that we want to combine then. This is the largest seaweed farm in Sweden so far. It's right in a marine national park up in Koster National Park, close to the Norwegian border. It's only a 2-hectare farm, but this was our research farm. Now this led to a development of a company called Nordic Sea Farm that now have plans to become Northern Europe's biggest seaweed biomass delivery company. And now we have got a concession on 30 hectares of seaweed farming on the Swedish west coast. And that is also by itself. It's not in any multi-use combination. We have got that permit now. But we don't see that this will be enough. We could take the next slide. This is what we are doing. We are cultivating the seaweeds underwater on ropes. It's like hanging forests down there. The biomass grows very, very fast. We deploy them. They are 3 millimeter in size. We harvest 5 months later. They are 3 meter in size. And the Swedish waters are super productive in biomass. The nice thing with the seaweed biomass, we could take the next slide, is that it could be used for so many things. And this is just from the Nordic Sea Farm now, and the market is being developed. It's for vegetarian food, veggie burgers, it's like sausages. We are developing different alcoholic things like beer and gin, where we are tasting with seaweeds, and that is more. And we are also working with the material side, developing alternative plastics and so on. And this is a part of the Swedish bio-based strategy, and seaweed farming will be important, and it could be used for so many things, for food, for feed, for materials, for energy, etc. And it also have a lot of beneficial things for the marine environment, providing, you could say, ecosystem services to the marine environment itself. And just giving you an idea what could be done. I mean, we have a Swedish IKEA. They roll 1 billion meatballs every year that they send out on the world market. It's the 6th biggest restaurant chain in the world. 1 billion meatballs. If we were just think about making them a little bit more vegetarian by including some seaweed biomass there, say a few percentage, we are talking big farming to meet that demand from the industry. Are we going for alternative to plastics? Big demand. Some of these seaweeds could be used to lower the methane release from cows. We have 350 cows in Sweden. You put this algae and you will have less methane release. If that works, and the cows eat about 20 kilos every day, you put in the feed some algae, we are talking big farming. So we need to meet these demands now, where seaweed will be more and more important. And this will happen in Sweden, it will happen in Norway. Norway are already now planning to be the world total volume of seaweed produced in the world today. Norway want to produce that in about 20 years in Norway. So it's a fast growing market, and this happens now in Sweden. And if we are going to be compatible here, we need to combine this with the wind farming is very essential here, because they are taking a lot of marine space into these wind farms. And they should, of course, include seaweed farming there in the wind farm. Next slide. Well, I think this is the last slide, actually. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Frederick.
Yeah, thank you.
Was it a last slide? Yeah. I would say so. Thanks very much. It was very good to hear actually how the two industries, how the two users can actually start from the outset together. And it will be interesting to definitely follow that project and see how that plays out in terms of regulation and everything. And yeah, it was also interesting to hear how in some countries, aquaculture, be it seaweed, is accepted already and people have a positive attitude. And then when it comes to the offshore wind, that's something they do not really want to have. And that really differs from country to country. Okay, great. With that, I would like to introduce our last speaker for today, Hans Sorson from Spock Consultancy. Hans has over 45 years of experience working in the interface of research and business. In the last 26 years, he's been a CEO and owner of Spock Consultancy focused on renewable energy. He has been involved in several offshore wind farms in Denmark and abroad. And among other, he is also leader of one of the pilots in the United project that combines offshore wind farms and tourism. Hans, we're very happy to have you with us today, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the nice introduction, Ivana. The project I'm going to talk about is a wind farm just outside Copenhagen, so please next slide. I will give the background. And then just a few words about marine spatial planning in Denmark and how we are at Middelgrund and Wind is combining power with tourism. And last, just an example of how you can make a multi-use combining wind and wave energy. Next slide, please. So we have the introduction. So just in the background of this paper, you see the wind farm we are talking about, Middelgrund Wind. So next slide, please. What we see here is a map you find if you're looking for marine spatial planning in Denmark. You have no report, you just have a digital map. It's out for consultation. Once more, and you can just click on the map. It's an active, interactive marine spatial planning. And if I have clicked on the energy use, you will see the next picture. Please, the next slide. Here you see what you will find when you are clicking on renewable energy. And what is also called to the left-hand side, energy island, is also renewable energy. But there's nothing about multi-use at all. Nothing is giving problems either, but it's simply not mentioned. Go to the next slide, please. Well, about Middelgrund Wind and tourism. Middelgrund Wind is situated 2.5 kilometers from the harbor of Copenhagen. We established it in 2000 with the largest offshore wind farm in the world. Today, a tiny small wind farm offshore. 1/15 or 1/20 of a standard offshore wind farm is only 40 megawatt. But at that time, with the largest wind turbine you can buy, 2 megawatt turbines, we are still delivering 3% of power to Copenhagen. We have two owners. 50% is operated by Copenhagen municipality, Offshore, and the other 50%, where I'm board member, is a cooperative with 8,550 people. Next slide, please. Visiting a wind farm in Denmark is an old tradition. Owners usually have invited to visit the wind farm the third Sunday in June, called the Windmill Day. It's not only power windmill, but also standard old, 100 years old windmills. And you can usually visit. It has been a little more complicated since 2007 or 8, where wind turbines was constructed in another way, so it's not so easy to climb them. In our cooperative, we started visiting the building site even back in 1998. We have 1,600 people there, and I can tell you it was not easy to coordinate that. But we also have wind trips every 2 years. We have 150 to 200 people coming and visiting the wind farm just in one day. And then we have about 30 to 40 other visits during the year. Please, next slide. What happened is that you can go by a larger boat, up to 30 people, if you want to enter the turbine. Because of shallow water, we need a special boat. Or we can use a rib boat, but I can tell you it's not that easy all the time. Just last Saturday, we tried to enter the turbine, but the wind was in northeast, not very strong, but the current in the area and combined with the wind is not making it easy. Well, some trips are only just to have a look. Other visitors introduced by typical international developers in offshore wind, they want to know everything. And we try to answer questions because all our knowledge is free. Please, next slide. But how about safety insurance? That was one issue, because when things like tourism grows from just visiting by the owners to be people coming from everywhere in the world, we have to be careful. We have several floors in the turbine, and by authorities, you are allowed to fall down 8 meters, which is the maximum distance between the floors, so we don't need special equipment. But the owners usually have no interest. That's the biggest problem. In Denmark, you can usually only visit our wind farm. And a neighboring wind farm also operated by a cooperative until 2 years ago. The legal and safety rules are now established, and we have insurance. So, but thanks to United Project, this has been solved. Please, next slide. And then to my proposal. Already back 7 years ago, my PhD student Julia, co-author here, and myself, we made a study for the Danish TSO, how to combine offshore wind and wave energy in the North Sea. If you know the sea, you will know that there's about 6 to 8 hours between the peak of wind and the peak of the waves. So we can share the same cable. And what we studied just for the transmission system operator in the North Sea was how much do you save just in balancing cost, nothing else. If you add two wind farm 100 megawatt together with a wave farm 100 megawatt based on real data. And that's the data you see to the left-hand side in the slides here. It's the wave heights, and you see the periods where you combine the wind and the wave. And what is happening is that you save about 10 million euros a year just by combining things. So the incentive should be great. I mean, you also save cables and all these other things. Next slide, please. You will find all this report, if you like, on our webpage, and you have the reference here also to the United Project. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hans. Excellent overview. And thank you for being on time as well. We have some time for the discussion, not so much. I will go to our chat box to see actually what are our questions. We have received a lot of them. I see a lot of questions related to how do fishers actually react to the combination between offshore wind farms and passive fisheries, and how does this change of gear and everything how are they accepting it, how are they reacting to it. So maybe I read one of these questions, but I see there is quite some related to that. Okay, right. Okay, Yeah, so wonderful presentation and great results from Stefan Husa. How would you tackle if fisheries decide early on that they do not want to collaborate? I think this question, as I said, is related again for the combination between offshore wind farms and fisheries, and this collaboration that really needs to happen in order to find pragmatic solutions. So perhaps Sophie or Vanessa, what would be kind of your take on this?
Sure, I can jump in if you like, and then I'm sure Vanessa's got plenty to add, and David as well. I know he's joining me at the moment. So I guess specific to that question, if fishers decide early on that they don't want to collaborate, I think the first thing we'd want to do is understand exactly why that is the case. Would it be the fear of displacement or possibly other concerns around compensation for loss of fishing grounds? Secondly, I think I'd want to establish how we could help address those concerns, such as demonstrating the positive effects we're seeing from offshore wind farms and any research behind how this impacts commercial fish stocks within the area. Like I mentioned, the Orsted westernmost rough study that showed kind of negative impacts on the target crustacean stock in that area. I guess finally, and I'll let David jump in if he's got anything to add, but I think ultimately it's a conversation that does have to happen. The North Sea and other areas are increasingly crowded, and I think a lack of collaboration between key stakeholders would only kind of gridlock efforts to improve and adapt marine spatial planning that looks at both ecological and socioeconomic benefits as well. So hopefully that answers the question. I'll pass over to David if you'd like to add anything into that.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. I think just very briefly, I think, we talk about fishers and fishing communities. Well, of course, they're all very different and very disparate, big offshore trawlers versus small inshore boats. Some are in associations and some are not. I think in my experience, it's very rare for large groups or individuals of fishers not to engage. I think there may be occasions, maybe disputes, there may be trouble along the way, but ultimately there's a sharing of sea space here. So if one has an interest in sharing that space, then the engagement will happen. And as Sophie said, if it's done in the right way, then I think it's quite rare that the discussions will fall apart completely.
Thank you very much.
Can I add something, Ivana?
Sure, go ahead, Hans.
Yeah, well, it's really a surprise for me, even though I learned by Vanessa that you have different rules, I know, in different countries, but in the Danish context, we have never had any problem. I mean, the fishermen are asked not to operate during the 9 to 10 months when you are doing the wind farm, and you pay compensation to them by law, simply because the fishermen have the first right to the sea. But after that, there's no problem. And first of all, probably because you are not allowed on shallow water to trawl, and that should be not allowed in any country because you destroy the environment totally. And I mean, if you have that rule, there's no problem. We have fishermen around the wind turbines. We have laser fishermen around the wind turbines. And I don't have any claim.
Thank you, Hans, for that. Yeah, I think that's a very relevant topic, and as you said, there is quite some comments really emphasizing on the fact that countries do have different regulations when it comes to that. There is an opinion, not so much a question, from Carl Dahlberg saying that my opinion is that multi-use won't happen unless it is part of the permitting conditions from the start. And then other participants, are saying not necessarily a permit, but maybe an agreement for sure, and so on. There is also another question on, does MSP have to be binding for multi-use planning to have an effect? Because in guiding an open door marine areas, it can easily become first come, first serve. So I think this is interesting, and it might be a bit rephrased also from my perspective, at least. So should multi-use for certain uses or for certain zones be binding in MSP? I'm not sure if that would be a correct rephrasing, but what do you think about that? Perhaps Vanessa, we haven't heard from you, and you have this overview of the European study as well. So what will be kind of your take on that?
Yeah, so basically, if I understand that correctly, the question, so it has to be designed, co-use or co-location of activities have to be designed right from the beginning. And it's part of normally it should be part of a marine spatial planning process. Marine spatial planning is implemented, as we all know, on a national basis. So that means there are particular regulations, and the way, for example, offshore sites for offshore wind farms are, for example, are granted. So this is the scheme that has every member state has a different scheme, and this is why we have very particular solutions how to establish that. And so there's what we learned over the past 10 years. I would say that this is not there's not the one recipe, another one solution how to serve it best. That's we can learn from success stories. And I think this is the main message. And it needs, and this is, at least it applies for the German context, it really needs a buy-in in trying to make this happen, basically. So from the Marine Spatial Planning Authority, we know that co-location or co-use options are they try to promote this. Now we're having particular measures, for example, so that fisheries is now passive gear fisheries, so no trawling is permitted within the safety zone now, and which has been formally prohibited. And now this is slowly we can see that the sector are converging towards some solutions and ideas, but this is very complex, and it has to be there needs to be a strategy right from the beginning.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. I completely agree. There needs to be a strategy right from the beginning and discussion about it, especially if we're talking about, let's say, real multi-use where two activities, two or more, are really combined together also in a physical sense, because we have touched upon the topic of restoration within wind farms. We're also perhaps talking about innovative new design of offshore foundation or the scour protection, which is serving as a reef. So it's difficult to add that as an add-on whenever the offshore wind farm is already in place. And that then it would be perhaps more kind of a co-location, but not a joint development right from the onset. So I'm thinking if the two uses are to develop right from the onset together, that has to be included already the pre-planning stage, already the design stage. And I'm not sure if we have such examples already. There was one question, Sophie, also regarding so these examples that are taking place, if we understand correctly, those are mainly kind of co-location between the restoration activities. So kind of some meters, or how far actually from the actual foundation, and are they touching the structure or not so much? Would you know? What were kind of the examples that you have considered in the study?
Oh, sorry. I can answer that quickly, Ivana, if you like. There's so many different types of restoration activities. I think coexistence with conservation definitely sums it up. I think with Gunfleet Sands, our specific feasibility study there, that would look at placing secured cages actually on the scour protection area. And that, the reason why that is because oysters tend to like coarser substrate rather than kind of sandy, muddy sediment. So that would be very close to the base of the turbines. But depending on, I guess, what you want to restore at the site, so maybe you wanted to look at enhancing, hidey holes or something for finfish that are commercially important, like Atlantic cod, that's something that's being looked at, that might actually attach, to the monopile, for example. So there's so many different ways you could engineer something to coexist within the wind farm at different areas. I hope that answers the question.
Excellent. Yes, thanks very much. Frederick?
Yeah, I could comment on that, actually.
Definitely.
I mean, the case I showed now was more, maybe if they get the permit, we don't know that yet, it will be a coup then, but they are positive to integrate seaweed farming there, because that we have been also approached with many developers that actually want to go jointly into a process, because it's very difficult to get these wind farm permits out there. And they think that maybe if they do this multi-use with aquaculture combination, that it will make it easier to get the permit, actually. So that's how, and then they also have to adapt, because the wind farmer owners, they don't want people to be there with boats and things like that. They're very restrictive now, at least the few we have in Sweden. But that has to be changed, of course, and maybe also the design of the wind farms a bit. So there is a lot of things to do there, I would say.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, let's see. We have also a question regarding the Middelgrunden wind farm. Okay, so this one says, cool with visits to the wind farms. Again, from Carl Darberg. Is there available wave energy technology which could be installed today, matching wind farms construction today, or are you suggesting supplementing old ones? So this is kind of a design question, I would say, and Hans, perhaps you could answer it.
Yeah, sure. Yes, there is wave devices available to be deployed. Even you have devices like the Wave Dragon, where you can put on 2 wind turbines of the same size, so you get 4 megawatt wave energy and 4 megawatt wind energy combined. But the problem is that it's not commercially, it just needs to be demonstrated. And that's where we need some incentives. And that's maybe the key word also for other multi-use. If you don't add some incentives when you ask for tenders for offshore wind, you will probably never see any multi-use. Or if you add incentives maybe later on in combination, maybe interest from the wind developers to invite other people. But else they will say it's just problem. It was exactly the reaction I got from the wind turbine owner in the North Sea when I asked them to combine it with a wave device. Oh no, the risk, and if you hit our jack up cable and all these things, of course, all things that can be solved.
Right. Okay. Okay. I also see questions regarding really kind of balancing different priorities. There is a last question asking, what is the current view of adding structures? Will there be an added effect or mostly a gathering, attracting function on the existing stocks? Over time, do fisheries on the whole become more productive? So it is kind of, I would say, a question of either allowing the fisheries as they are, or adding the structures, and kind of how to balance these different priorities. Would anyone have any take on this?
Can I add something, Ivana? I think it goes back to the previous point that Hans said. Really, it depends. So in some places yes, some places no. But I think it's that point about risk, really, about introducing risk. I think the enhancement or the introduction of new opportunities at the very early stages is great in theory, but a wind farm developer really just wants to manage risk and maintain low risk in their project. So that kind of incentivization, I think, is absolutely key, whether it's through policy or financial incentive. It's got to be really important for this. And I think the answer to your question is it depends. I think it depends on the location, depends on the species, depends on the introduction. But I think to get this multi-use, the incentivization has to be there, because at the moment the priorities generally are, if a country says our priority is renewable energy, so therefore that takes precedence. And therefore, if you're a wind farm developer, you're going for that, and it's up to government or authorities to really try and level that playing field out a bit, I think.
Exactly. That's a very good point. Thanks very much for that. Also, I was thinking, what is really, and we have some questions related to that. What is kind of a driver from the industry perspective, from the offshore wind farm industry perspective, to really join this? Is it being even more sustainable and contributing more to climate solutions, or what is it? Because really, when it comes to licensing, when it comes to health and safety, insurance policies, etc., it kind of almost even more complicates things. Frederick, I think you have your hand up. Perhaps you would like to add on that. Just unmute, please.
Comment. I mean, this combination with wave energy, we have been discussing that, and it's not so good, apparently, at least according to Swedish meteorological, hydrological, not in the Kattegat area, or we have two small waves, actually. It's not that wavy, so it might not be for our waters anyway. So that was just a comment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think Baltic in general is not so wavy, although the West Coast might have some, but okay. Vanessa, I think you wanted to make perhaps a point regarding the driver from the offshore wind industry actually to engage in these projects, or I know you had your hand up, so I would like to give you a chance.
Okay, so I wanted to, basically I had three comments. First of all, about what we know in terms of enhancing stocks, for example, and to establish long-term fisheries benefits. This is really about the style or the design and the constructions. We know that there are differences between using monopiles or tree pots or other foundations. So having this knowledge, and this is what we are lacking in a quantitative manner at the moment, having this knowledge would allow us to give recommendations for future constructions. This is the first thing. About the incentives from developers of the offshore wind energy sector. So basically, their main interest that the operation is not interfered by any other activities. So risk was a very good, so risk management is really in the essence what it's all about. So if, for example, fisheries and the co-location of fisheries and offshore wind farm would become real, you would need to have this zonation, ensuring also from the industry that they can manage their maintenance work. I mean, I know there's some field work inside from field work inside those offshore wind farms. They have from a day-to-day change in the maintenance work, and they have to be able to maneuver around in those parks, and this needs to be secured. So this is all about safety regulations, which comes first. But at least in Germany, our pilot study, so the main reason is to have to contribute at least to the knowledge base on what are the ecological benefits, for example, for having offshore wind farms, to improve our knowledge base and to have a better image also in the society, or from societal perspective.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Vanessa, for that. Maybe just quickly also from Frederick, I'm also interested to know, with regards to this new project, do you expect that combination with seaweed would potentially also fight off some of this not in my backyard for offshore wind farms? And overall, what is the potential of multi-use as a concept in this regard, especially when it comes to this collaborative ownership structures and so on? So we're really here talking about more innovation and social innovation as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have made scientific studies on the perception of aquaculture in Swedish waters, and it shows of all the different aquaculture, you could be mussels, fish, etc. Seaweed farming is considered positive by the Swedish community around the Swedish west coast. And the opposite is, of course, with wind farms, that is not considered that positive. So it might be to an advantage for the windcraft energy to make this combination. Okay. And that it also could be, then they see, the public will see more that the marine space that get occupied will be used for more things. And I think that is positive.
More benefits are derived, and perhaps more benefits locally as well, if that seaweed ends up locally as well and providing jobs and so on. Okay, excellent. I think we have touched upon some very important topics in this session, in this workshop. Although it was quite short, hour and a half, I think we packed a lot. There is still lots of questions online. I would like to very briefly wrap it up. It's already 5 p.m. I know everyone is very, very tired as well. Thanks very much to all the speakers. Your interventions were excellent, really. Organizers will follow up also with a brief afterwards. So thanks once more, and thanks everyone who joined to watch, and thanks for your questions as well. With this, very briefly, I would like to again thanks everyone, and have a great day, and end this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, and a round of applause to all the participants, first of all, in this session. And a round of applause to our amazing moderator, Ivana Lukic, for delivering this knowledge-rich session on the role of MSP in supporting sustainable ocean multi-use and blue economy. Wow, it is an hour and 30 minutes, but you really packed.
You mute yourself accidentally. Okay.
Yeah, we're back. Sorry for that. So thank you, everybody, for this first day on the beta stage. And don't forget that the evening event is about to come, so you can take off your jackets. You can sit back and relax, because on the main stage at 6 o'clock Central Eastern Time, there will be an informal get-together with an MSP quiz. So you will have some fun right there. And the stage will also be open to you for toast to everybody. So please do come back on the main stage. On this stage, on the beta stage, we will meet tomorrow, June 2nd, at 9:30 Central Eastern Time. There will be the workshop number 9, MSP and Climate Change from Theory to Practice in the Baltic Sea region. So see you tomorrow here on the beta stage. But right now, please do go to the main stage, because the festivities are continuing there. My name is Artur Sozolinch, and I wish you a pleasant evening. Bye.